high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Mauro, and with me, as always, is Mike Walsh. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Jen. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
No, you're not. You just got over food poisoning, and I think it's important that everybody knows that.
Really? You're going to share that with everybody?
No, here's the reason I'm going to share that is because you did an incredible job this week putting out our newspaper, even though you are basically unable to eat for the better part of 48 hours, stuck at home. We found out that I really don't need you in the office any longer because you could put together an entire edition from your couch in a compromised state. So that was a truly heroic work you did putting the paper together this week.
Well, thank you. I could not do it, obviously, without a team that really stepped up, like they would do every week, but filled in a lot of when I was falling down, literally. So, yeah, thank you.
It was great. And I also say that, actually, it was just delivered to my desk. I haven't even looked at it yet. So just if anybody notices any errors, Jen was compromised. So come on, give her a break.
Full disclosure. Should we just put that on this issue?
That's
number.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's any sacrilege or heresy in here, that was the reason why. It was the demon in her belly, not the demon anywhere else.
Volume 71, number 28, the food poisoning edition. Excellent.
But actually, it's a great edition. I do hope people will check it out. We talk about this on the program all the time, that we really want folks who listen to this podcast, which is sort of an extension of our own Catholic Star Herald. There's Catholic media in almost every diocese in the United States, and there's Catholic media that's independent of dioceses all over the place. You can't throw a dead cat without hitting, a Catholic newspaper somewhere. I know that's a phrase I use all the time. I don't know where I picked it up. I apologize to all the cat owners like you, Jen.
Well, like me, yes.
Like you. Somehow it is stuck in my head and I just can't get rid of it. One day I'm going to look up and figure out where I found that. But to our listeners, if you haven't checked out your local publication or the national publications, I really do encourage you to do it. There are some truly professional people out there writing and, in our case, talking, and people who doing a lot of digital work and online work, but still plenty of papers themselves that exist. And it's actually a great tragedy that more Catholics don't avail themselves of that resource, because a lot of the Catholic news that exists, or Catholic issues that exist, just don't get to play in the traditional media, the secular media, any longer. So it's good that you have these resources if you want to get a truly in-depth accounting of what is going on in Catholic news. I know, Jen, this is something you focus on all the time.
Yeah, I think that's really important to note that even if the Catholic news might get some secular press, it's not always from somebody that's exactly schooled in the issues. I mean, I think anyone who's a journalist knows that you do your best, and when you're out of your realm, you talk to experts in that realm so that you know what you're talking about. But sometimes the articles can be oversimplified. So I think that's another reason that the Catholic press is very important, so that you can dive a little deeper into what these issues are that are facing our church today from Catholics who might study it and understand that a little better.
Now, I'm fixating on this topic a little bit because I want to thank our friends to the north who we've had a few crossover episodes. I was listening to Tara and Jerry from the Diocese of Metuchen, their podcast, Am I Not Here? And on the podcast, they were discussing how it was Catholic Press Month, to which I sat there and went, wait, I'm a member of the Catholic Press. I didn't know it was Catholic Press Month. I need to fix that. So we want to make sure that everybody we know now knows that it's Catholic Press Month. I also want to point out Tara and Jerry seemed to have a great deal of concern that I was going to steal their guest, who their guest was that day, with the idea of bringing her into our own fold because she's moved from North Jersey to South Jersey. And I want them to know that they should fear. That's a very likely scenario, because I will steal talent anywhere. I stole you from the Diocese of Trenton. I will steal others from elsewhere. I want good people. And I got news for you. The folks across the other side of the river in Philadelphia, I am not above stealing their people too. So it's a word of warning to everyone. I'm a thief.
Mike, I think we should introduce our guests. And I think it's important to note that you might not have known it was Catholic Press Month, but I knew it was Catholic Press Month. As the editor of the Catholic Star Herald, I would like to make that known that even through food poisoning, I did know that. So would that be okay with you if we introduce our guests?
That would be a great. I'm actually very excited because of the guests we got. They all jumped on at the very last minute, and they were very kind enough to give us some of their time. And they are a murderer's row of Catholic journalists. So yes, please, Jen, introduce them.
All right, great. So joining us on the podcast today, we have JD Long-Garcia. He's a senior editor at America Magazine and the past president of the Catholic Media Association. Welcome, JD.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Matthew Gambino, editor of CatholicPhilly.com, the news site of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Hi, Matt.
Good afternoon, Jen.
And with us also, of course, we have our own Pete Sanchez, staff writer of the Catholic Star Herald and co-host of the award-winning Talking Saints podcast. Hey, Pete.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon.
So thank you all for joining us on the podcast to talk about Catholic press. So I want to start out talking about, a little bit about what it is that you do and how you got into Catholic journalism.
Maybe we could start with JD.
I started in Catholic press basically because I got my PhD application rejected and I needed to get a job. So the student loans were coming due, and my mom was like, "Hey, maybe you should get a job. You study journalism, why don't you, So I'm actually here from, I'm in Mesa, Arizona, but back then I was as well. And I started working for the Diocese of Phoenix. So I got a job working for the Catholic Sun newspaper. And I worked there for about 9 years. And then got a job working at the Archdiocese of Los Angeles at their diocesan newspaper for I think it must have been 3.5 years or something. I don't know. And then I've been in America for about the last 4 years, I guess. So, and it's a real blessing to be a part of Catholic media. And I guess they don't have Catholic press parades in your neck of the woods, because we've had parades every day here. So it's to forget, I guess. But if you don't have the parades, but anyways, just being able to really put into practice the discipline of journalism and also my faith. It's hard to get any better than this for me, and it's learning from my peers, but also from all the beautiful people that I think we get a chance to meet in our work that just inspire me to be a better Catholic. So I'm happy to be on the podcast and talking to you guys.
Thanks for joining us, JD. How about you, Matt? Matt and I met a few times, and that was a veiled threat to him earlier when I said I might steal folks from the great Archdiocese of Philadelphia. But, I'm sure I'll be kind about it.
Well, if you like a challenge, Mike, there's a challenge for you. Go ahead.
Just don't steal my people.
Yeah. So about 1 million years ago, I was a seminarian in St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia. And a professor said, "Hey, son, where'd you learn how to write so well?" And I said, "Public high school." And then he got off the floor and said, "You didn't go to Catholic school?" I said, "No, I didn't." So I was just minding my own business when an upperclassman in the seminary who was running the seminary newsletter got mono and was basically asleep for 6 months. And they said, "Hey, listen, we need somebody to run the newsletter. You need to talk to people that that you can assign stories to. You need to edit their copy when it comes back, put a headline and get a photo, and put together the publication." And so that began then. And when I got out of the seminary, I happened to, they were the Catholic Standard and Times, which is the Philadelphia newspaper, ran a circulation campaign that came to my house. And my dad saw an ad for, "Hey, look, Matt, they're looking for a sports editor at the Catholic Standard and Times." So I had left the seminary. So I thought, well, I need a job. So I got into it, and it might strike some people as strange that a Catholic newspaper could have a sports editor. But at the time, there were 18 Catholic high schools owned by the Archdiocese, plus another half dozen Catholic academies. And there still are 15 Archdiocesan high schools. So we have our own, NCAA thing going on here just on the high school level. So I got into Catholic journalism thanks to mononucleosis and a circulation campaign. And that was 1989 when I started, like I said, almost a million years ago. And I've done some secular newspapers. I was editor for some community newspapers, and some online stuff when the .com boom was booming. And then when it was no longer booming, I got back into print. And I've been the editor of the Catholic Standard and Times, and since 2012, CatholicPhilly.com, which is the digital successor of the Catholic Standard and Times, all that's since 2012. Since 2007. So we're coming up on 15 years sitting in this chair in Philadelphia.
That's great. Congratulations. I always love to hear these stories of how everybody got into journalism, because it's always like an accident or somebody's friend said, hey, you should do this. It's I love that. Pete, I feel like yours is going to be a calling. Tell us about how you got into Catholic journalism.
Well, I think it started with my love of writing and reading. I still have fond memories of reading Jason Stark, sports writer, in the Philadelphia Inquirer, growing up as a kid. And then going into high school and college, I was first a sports editor in high school. And then in college, I was entertainment editor at St. Joseph's University. Go Hawks, good Jesuit academy. And then after graduate school, I went there for undergrad and grad, and I needed to find a job. And one of my good friends, his mother, saw an ad in the Star Herald and said, I think Mike knew I needed a job. And he said, hey, my mom found this. So, and kind of like what JD was saying about discipline between journalism and faith, it was around this time in college that I was getting involved in more campus ministry and service. And I thought it'd be a nice synthesis to kind of, I can write. Why don't I not hide it under a bushel basket, but decide to utilize it for the faith? And that was 2007, January 2007. When I started. So I'm coming up on 16 years. Wow. Think about it. I'm not good at math. So I was.
That's why you're a writer, of course.
Yeah, no journalists are good at math.
Yeah. So it's been a great ride so far.
Don't worry, Pete. That's literally why I married an accountant, because I would be destitute if I was left to my own devices, because I too can't do math. But it is funny that everyone, Jen and I have talked about our own paths a couple of times before on the podcast. I will admit that mine was actually intentional. My goal. Well, I was about to say my goal was to be a reporter, and I just remembered it wasn't the case. I had intended to be a teacher, and that did not materialize. So because I was able to take a photograph and string 3 words together, I decided to start pitching myself as a reporter elsewhere. And oh my goodness, I never thought about it. If I had become a teacher, my entire life would be different right now. I'm sure I'd be more miserable, and I'm so happy here.
You've never thought about that? You've never thought about if your life took a different path?
I actively avoid thinking about my past, because no good can come of that. So, yeah.
Michael,
and Jen,
I was just going to ask, it seems like from a previous podcast, if I'm not mistaken, you were maybe it was just self-deprecating about your ability to take photos. There's something like that I feel like I heard that recently. So maybe you missed your calling as a teacher. I'm just putting that out there.
You know what? You might be onto something. I would be an award-winning teacher instead of a non-award-winning podcaster and middling photographer. That's a good point. I have your JD. Now I am truly sad about my life. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go
happy Catholic Press Month,
Apparently, Mike needs to get out to the parades. You need to get out to the parades more, Mike.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. Now Jen has not had the experience of going to a Catholic Media Association conference, much to her chagrin. Pete's been to at least one. I've been to 2, I think. And I tell everyone that they really need to go to them. Anybody who's in the press world, because that's actually exactly what it is. It is a 3-day parade of some of the greatest Catholic media talent you'll ever see. It's a great opportunity for those of us who have kind of left journalism behind us and entered into the dark and murky world of PR as a communications director, where we can all get together with our fellow Catholics and kind of commiserate a little bit. But it is true though, being around other journalists, which is one of the reasons we were actually looking forward to this podcast, and sort of, I will admit that I get energized when I'm around other folks. Although Jen also noticed when we had our friends from Metuchen up, Boyd is a lot of dark humor. It's a lot of, we enjoy the dark humor. Now, Matt, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about your time in Philadelphia, because you have gone through some trials and tribulations, sir.
Somebody mentioned dark humor.
Yes, but you've come through it gloriously. You were there when the Standard and Times was still in existence, and then it wasn't, and somehow you were told, go make this work digitally. And I've always wanted to ask you, what was that transition like for you?
Well, I mean, nobody did mention anything.
Oh no,
and basically, I was supposed to be getting good, solid financial information, which I wasn't, until I stamped my feet and got the information and found out we were broke. Ever since, I've tracked every cent that comes in and out. But at any rate, no, we couldn't continue. We couldn't put out another issue. And the two options of waiting to be told what to do and doing nothing were not options. It was up to me to do something. So we had a website for the Catholic Standard and Times going back to 1997. I know because I made it. I was one of the first people to get into America Online and Netscape. And I thought, I work at a Catholic newspaper, and this Catholic newspaper should have a website. I didn't know how to do it, but I learned. I taught myself. And I moved on into secular media shortly after that. But the website continued, had several different iterations. So when I came back in 2007, there it was still. By 2011, we rebranded a really clunky URL to something easy for people to remember, which was CatholicPhilly.com. Mm-hmm. So a year later, when the print publication folded, literally, what did we do? Well, let's continue to do what we can with the property, the brand that we have. We're going to make this brand a household name in the Philadelphia area. Well, it's taken us almost 10 years now, and we're becoming a household name. People have more or less ceased calling us Philly.com, PhillyCatholic.com, and now they're pretty much zoning in on CatholicPhilly.com. And I feel it's a great accomplishment because that's one of the hardest things to do in all of business is establish a brand. Mm-hmm. So we went from a microscopic audience of those people who were interested in Catholic news, but no longer wanted a print newspaper, bringing those people together with the people who wanted a print newspaper, but no longer could have one. And the digital was what they had to learn. And we found that it's hard to change behavior. So what we need to do is let's meet the people where they are. So we came up with something they could easily use, which is email. An email newsletter pushes the content to them. And all they need to do is find something in that dozen or dozen and a half items every week that they like, which is basically a cross-section of the whole website from the whole week. Even though we publish every day, new content every day, this newsletter represents a snapshot of a week. So people click on that and they read the content that they would read in the newspaper. Now, we still have some ways to go because a lot of people think the newsletter is all that we are. They don't even realize when they're clicking on an item, they're going to the website, CatholicPhilly.com. But again, we'll get there. We'll meet them where they are, and we'll continue to serve their needs. And our mission, whether it's digital or it's in print, remains the same. It's to inform, to inspire, and to form readers in the Catholic faith. And we don't have an agenda with this. We don't have things that boxes we need to check for ideology. We have a mission, and it's that mission. And we think with the church, which doesn't make us many friends, can make us some enemies sometimes, but we play everything right down the middle with a sense of mission.
Well, I'll tell you, Matt, I am a subscriber, and I have been a subscriber for years to the email. And I'm happy to say I steal ideas from you guys all the time. So thanks.
Highest form of flattery. Thank you, Mike.
You're very welcome. And actually, I will tell you that we have on several occasions had the thought that we need to start putting together an email newsletter as well for the exact same reasons. Fortunately, our print edition is in good health, but I've often said that is one element in our toolbox that is currently empty. And one of these days, I'm going to figure out a way of getting it done on a regular basis. We tested the waters a few years ago, and it didn't quite work out. So I think it's about time. Now that we're post-pandemic, now it's time to start focusing on it again. Although that must have been, Matt, just one follow-up. I have to imagine being fully digital really set you up well for the pandemic life.
Absolutely right, Mike. We were already fully digital. We were not in print at all. So when we had to go to the winds to our home and try to coordinate people from their homes, it was actually pretty easy. We publish on an environment, a digital environment that's not tied to the diocese, so that if anything were to happen at the diocese server, we wouldn't be, in bad shape. We're on a third-party public server that is globally redundant. So when we had periods of peak traffic, I could send a quick email at 11 o'clock from a theater, which I did once, and ask the vendor to open up our bandwidth a little bit more. We're getting a lot more traffic. All our files are kept on a third-party file server, Google Drive. Our email was through Gmail and other sources. Our videos were all through YouTube. Our podcasts were through SoundCloud. All these third-party secular vendors that we never skipped a beat. We talked as a staff every day. We emailed and texted throughout the day. We actually put up more content during the pandemic than we ever did because it was a really news-intensive time. People wanted information, and we gave them all that we could. So being digital really sent our numbers through the roof.
That's fantastic. What a great learning curve, too. I mean, like you've already gone through that real boom of those journalist technology boom, which was, I would say, 2006 to 2012, or anyway, it all just changed so fast right in those areas. But then to switch again during COVID. But I think it's also important to notice that the consumers, they've changed as well, and whether it's Catholic journalism or secular, how they get the news. Did you find them responsive to what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, we've noticed that obviously traffic coming from our newsletter is the most engaged. It's our highest quality traffic because they're most engaged. Those folks tend to spend more time on the site than anybody else. We know because we can track where they're coming from. We know that they not only watched the story or the video or the photos when they clicked on the newsletter, they actually saw other pieces of content around the website. And we've designed the site to be able to engage them so that we have multiple points of interest all around the website. We also know that people coming from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia's website were also a leading referrer. So people wanted information about their church. They knew something about the Archdiocese. They had a link bookmarked. They went there. We had a widget installed on the Archdiocese website that updated Catholic Philly's content constantly in real time so that people would see new content all the time. We were very dynamic, almost a Catholic CNN type of thing. Mm-hmm. And finally, we made a real concerted effort 10 years ago to take keywords, also known as SEO, to put those keywords into every piece of content we had, because we know one of the other leading referrers, those people, the things that deliver traffic to us, is search. People go on to Google and they search for terms. Well, we make sure those keyword terms are in all the content that we do so people can find us. It's an odd way of doing evangelization, if you like, but it is effective. And we found that to be a highly successful way to have people consider material that they might not have found by having to remember CatholicPhilly.com. All you have to do is remember Google, and who could forget?
JD, I love hearing stories when the Catholic world uses great technology that's out there in the secular world and brings it in for our mission-based purposes. JD, now you're the only person currently who's non-diocesan affiliated on this call. And I had a couple questions for you as well related to your time in America. Now, certainly you have a diocesan background, but as an independent journalist for an independent Catholic news source like America, do you feel that's given you a bit more freedom than you had in the old days to pursue stories?
Yeah, that's real. That's real interesting. I kind of struggle with the for the last 4 years, but the role at a national publication versus at a local publication. I think that one of the really important things for me as a journalist is always having that community connection. So like how you get stories, you're like, somebody hears about it, or there's somebody at your parish that tells you about this or that or the other. And, I can only file so many stories about Mesa, Arizona in America. You know what I'm saying? So, so like it's been a challenge, that national dimension. There are some things that are more, that maybe I feel more free to cover. But I think in general, the trying to find that connection with the community and really allowing those on the margins to speak through Catholic media. That's something that I don't know, I've tried to do in my career, and I've tried to do it in America. And I think it's kind of essential, similar to what, just to echo the role of Catholic media and evangelization that Matt alluded to. I think that there's a way in which in Catholic media, whether it's in journalism or other kinds of communication, where we're trying to help our audience have a better relationship with God. But that also, we're also trying to enable our audiences to have a better relationship with one another, right? To love God and to love neighbor. And so I think that like in Catholic journalism at its best, I think it's when we're demonstrating that kind of love of neighbor, and we're able to be a medium for solidarity with people who are suffering injustice, and call attention to those things. So I don't know. I feel like I had within both, and it could just be my experience. Like you said, Michael, there's Catholic media all over, like Dead Cats. I'm sorry, I'm probably getting that wrong. I'm allergic to cats, but anyway, so there's Catholic outlets all over the place. So I'm sure everybody has a different experience. In my experience, both in Phoenix and Los Angeles, I was given quite a bit of room to do that kind of reporting that I thought was really important, and I'm doing that at America as well, just at a more national level. So I guess that the only the restriction that I don't see is it's geography, but that's, I don't know. I feel like I'm still navigating my way through that.
I think that's a good point that you just mentioned, though, when you were saying that there's Catholic media all over the place. Do you think, for anybody on the call, do you think on the podcast, that most of our Catholic population knows about Catholic media?
I think they have a sense of it from growing up, at least in the Philadelphia region. If you went to a Catholic school, and so many Catholics did, they were enculturated. The Catholic culture has various hallmarks, and information was one of them. So I think they kind of grew up with a sense of what the Catholic media, in this case, the newspaper, the Standard, people would always say, no matter what age they were, oh yeah, I remember the Standard when I was in school. So I think there is that kind of latent memory, but it's changed so much. Catholic media has changed a great deal. This podcast is one example of it. So I think that it's not so enculturated as it used to be, but people are inundated with media of all kinds. So there's the challenge, I think, for Catholic media to be found in the marketplace of media, whether that's websites, social media platforms, podcasts. We need to be where the people are. Let's be honest. We don't see as many of our fellow Catholics as we used to in worship spaces and faith formation events and so forth. But our fellow Catholics and so many other Christians and all people are thoroughly saturated in our media culture. And that's where our Catholic communications needs to be.
So Pete, you've got a long career now as a reporter in Catholic world, and you started, I would dare say that, you started in 2007. I would say that the life has changed a little bit for you over those years. But as someone who's been reporting in the same area though for this time, I'm curious, what kind of keeps getting you out of bed to write these stories?
Well, just wanting to, it's the people who I go and see in Camden County or Camden, right here, where my office is, or Atlantic City. Just kind of it's the people who inspire me every day, the priests, the religious, the laity. I did a story last Saturday, World Day for Consecrated Life. I met this religious sister who was celebrating 60 years, and she had the fervor. It's just amazing. She was not weary at all. She still had that joy of the gospel, the joy of Christ in her. And I could tell it had been with her every day of her 60 years. And just individuals like her, or the youth going out to the National Catholic Youth Conference in Indianapolis, and you have hundreds of thousands of youth in the Lucas Oil Stadium, but you could hear a pin drop because they're all kneeling in front of Eucharistic adoration. So just those beautiful moments, that's what I don't want to say I'm chasing them, but I my faith is just so built up by the individuals I meet every day. And it's just such a blessing and a privilege to tell their stories. And I feel the responsibility. I need to make sure I get it right. I need to make sure I do right by them, because they're just such great people. The individuals I meet in the 6 counties of New Jersey, or going out to 2015 when the Pope was in Philadelphia, or at the Catholic Media Conference where I met JD, and I've seen him a few times, I think, in Denver and Indianapolis and Green Bay. It's just great just to meet these people who build me up in the faith and as a writer. And
yeah, that's one thing that I found very different than from secular press versus Catholic press is, I think at the end, when I was in secular, which I enjoyed, I also love to tell, you're telling stories, you're reporting on the news, but when you're in Catholic press, you get to take it a little step further because you're looking at it through a lens of a Catholic Christian. Is that kind of, JD, you talked about a little bit too, of like justice and or charity. Whereas in secular, you might be assigned to something where I'm going to cover a car accident or a fire or other things like that. Whereas in Catholic press, you can be covering those things, absolutely, but you're doing it maybe through a different lens, through a charitable lens or justice, if there's an injustice being done here. So we even talked a little bit about evangelization. I feel like being a Catholic journalist and be able to see that through a Christian lens is it's an honor and it's a calling. It's the way I look at it.
Are you saying that you still have? I'm sorry, Jen. Are you saying that you still have the enthusiasm of a woman religious celebrating her 60th jubilee?
No? I do not.
Okay.
No.
Neither do I, but I hope to. I hope to when I've done this job for 60 years. I'll be 100. But
so, do you guys have any thoughts about our responsibility as Catholic journalists when it comes to our consumers? Especially we're reaching our audiences on so many different platforms now, like you said, Matt. What is our responsibility of helping our consumers do the same when it is like preventing sharing of disinformation or, advice for our consumers to find legitimate news sites? Do you have any advice there or thoughts?
I just want to maybe cut in and say, first of all, that what a privilege it is to be on a call with both Pete and with Matt, because I've known them for many years in the Catholic press, and I admire their work very much. And so to say that, and then I'm about to say something about print journalism, and so I don't want to get in a fight with Matt or anything, but I'm just kidding. But I'm a big fan of print, and I think that just as far as the earlier question about like how Catholic media is known. I think that like in LA, we did a transformation from the Tidings to Angelus, and I would run into people doing stories where they said, "Oh, I used to sell a subscription to the Tidings, many years ago, whatever," and that kind of relationship that I feel like Catholic media had decades ago, I don't think that we have the same one today. And I think that like your question about like the way that I'm hearing of it, but the responsibility of Catholic journalism to be truthful and to be like be a source of reliable news, I think is really important. And I think that like some of the industry trends in media in general are more about generating attention. And so I don't know, this we could go on this for a long time, but like we tend to receive our news now through social media platforms instead of going directly to websites or whatnot. And what do you get queued up for you? It's like, oh, well, this is something I really agree with. It turns out I was right all along, so I love this person, so I'm going to follow this person because he or she already agrees with me or whatever. And so I think that part of the challenge in Catholic media is to resist that. I mean, we oftentimes I think have to tell people things that they don't want to hear. I mean, it's not like, Jesus went around and the things that he said, it's like, oh, well, of course, Jesus, we've been doing that the whole time. No, it was kind of controversial, and not kind of at all. It was like when he was laying down the law, it ruffled a lot of feathers. And I think that's a struggle. And I think that in many ways, I work for a magazine that's run by the Jesuits, and we all work for the church in some way. I think it's very liberating to have that kind of support, to be able to tell the things that need to be told. So we can tell a truth that I would argue is more complete, because we have a certain degree of independence, because of the support that we have to actually say those things. It doesn't necessarily have to be popular. And I feel like sometimes in other media, more secular outlets, they're more concerned with pleasing their audiences. And I don't mean that we don't care about what our audiences do. I think we need to pay attention to that. Matt was talking about how the technology enables us to really know what's working and what's not. But at the same time, to really talk about the hard truths of the faith and some of the hard realities that are out there that make people uncomfortable. So yeah, I think it's a great calling and a great responsibility, and sometimes we're in a position where I think we're called to prayer, to pray about things. Pete, something you were talking about. I hope I write the story correctly. I mean, so many times someone shares like the story that I just don't feel like I'm worthy to tell, and I have to bring it to prayer. It's like, God, can you please help me with this one? Because like there is no way I am not a good enough writer to tell the story. And sometimes he helps, and if it doesn't work, if you ask God for help and it doesn't work, then you can just blame God afterwards. Like, well, I asked for help, So, but anyways, I think it's a great calling and responsibility, and it's one that I think that sometimes our secular colleagues don't have to face. Maybe they're not free to face because they have those other pressures, Yeah,
you said something, JD, that Jen and I often, in our dark way, we'll kind of joke about when we're looking at the layout of the paper, and Jen has complete authority to put anything in it she wants, and then I'll walk in and see what's laid out on the page, and I'll look at the page and go, man, are we going to get letters tomorrow? That is going to generate some conversation. And then I always say, and that number you want is jennifer.mauro@camdendiocese.org. But it's true though, that is actually very liberating, JD, is that we get to talk about things from a position that has tradition and truth behind it, which has buoyed me many times when we've had to make those hard decisions about what we were going to put in the paper, what we were going to put online, and knowing that I was going to irritate somebody and feeling quite comfortable with it because it's something that needs to be said, even though it's maybe hard to read, which, let's face it, particularly in the last 6 or 7 years, I've explained, and we talked about this in the podcast before, the Catholic population and the American population at large are actually quite similar. You have people who are very conservative, you have people who are very progressive, and here we are in the Catholic Church, very rarely appealing to both sides simultaneously. I've been saying for years we have a life and justice department that's currently unfilled, and there's a part of me that would really like to separate those two, because I'm not sure that they always go hand in hand, not so much in their beliefs, but in the audiences they appeal to. You have a lot of social justice folks and you have a lot of right to life folks, and sometimes those are not two groups that are going to see eye to eye on a lot of things. So it's very difficult to find a person who can speak to those two groups authentically without offending anybody. But it's an uphill climb. Jen, I'm curious, has there ever been a time, either here now or in your previous life in the Diocese of Trenton, where you had to pray about putting something in or writing something that you just weren't sure was going to end well?
Was going to end
I love asking Jen hard questions. This is the best. This is so rare. She doesn't have a response. I'm excited.
It is rare. What do you mean didn't end well? I definitely agree with JD that there have been articles where you've come from somebody's home or somebody's personal situation, and you sit down and say, how am I going to do that justice? Because, I've never been through anything like that. So, which is what we're called to do every day as journalists, putting yourself in a situation that you more than likely have never been in. But when it's specifically moving or touching, you don't want to get it wrong, like Pete said, with the details, but you don't want to get it wrong with the spirit of the article. So yes, I have had that, if that's what you mean. Yes. And then on the other hand, I've also come back from events so filled with the Holy Spirit, because that what you're writing about, that you do get to take the Catholic stance, that it just flows out and doesn't stop with what you're talking about with life and justice. And I think I've spoken about it on this program before, about reporting on the New Jersey law now, which is the right to die, to take your own life, but with medically. So when that legislation was still moving through Trenton, and going and meeting these people who had terminal illnesses, who did not want that legislation to pass, and also meeting those who did want it to pass, and the doctors on both sides and legislators. So yeah, you come home from that, and you write on it, but with the Catholic, with the catechism and what we believe behind it, that just flows out in that way. What about you, Matt? Any thoughts about what we're talking about right now, especially when we were also talking about, finding legitimate news sources and stopping the disinformation?
Yeah, well, disinformation, as I said earlier, I think it's important to play it right down the middle, is to be honest and tell the truth. And if it's going to offend somebody, it's going to offend somebody. Whether that's teachings and, really news events about the pro-life movement, or that's news events about immigration. Both those issues are lightning rods. But one thing that everybody can agree on is disdain for the news that they read. And in my 14 years as editor, we had stories where everybody hated us for telling the story, but we told it anyway. We at one point we were the diocese finances were $14 million in the red operationally. We had $350 million in unpaid obligations. We had a grand jury report on clergy sexual abuse. Oh, not one, but two. We had a statewide grand jury. We had, all kinds of problems, bad news. As bad as it could be. And I had to report on real estate, had to report on law, had to report on finance, in addition to pro-life and immigration. So the thing that I find that we do have to inform people. We have to tell them the truth. Catholic readers deserve to hear the truth from their church. And in my case, they deserve to hear it first, or as soon as possible. Coming from the position of, this is your church serving you. You might hear some of the story through secular media. You might not hear all of it. You might not hear, what the diocese has tried to do about this situation, whatever it is. But the thing that I find really that excites me is not all those I would call institutional stories that we have to tell because that's part of our mission. It's the stories when I go to a parish and I get to meet ordinary people living their Catholic faith in the world that we live in. And they are unsung heroes. So many Catholics who are just trying to be disciples of Christ the best they can today. And I get to do that by listening and looking around and observing their city neighborhood, observing their suburban town, which is a lot like so many other suburban towns, or their little country parish. Whatever that might be, boy, what a privilege it is for me to listen to them and to tell others about what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. And that's where it gets to the inspiration part of that mission I mentioned, the mission to inform, to form, but also to inspire. And I think hearing about other Catholics living their faith the best they can with all the family troubles and all the other troubles there are out there, what a great, joyful experience that can be.
Matt, listening to you talk makes me happy to do the job I do. Now I'm going to get a phone call in about 10 minutes. It's going to make me hate my job. But thank you for giving me 10 minutes of joy
You're welcome.
While I appreciate those quality words. JD, I wanted to ask you a little bit, since you are a past president of the Catholic Media Association, formerly known as the Catholic Press Association. You were the leading cheerleader for several years of Catholic press. I'm curious, did that alter your perspective? Did it make you more joyful about our role?
Yeah, well, cheerleading can be very difficult. It's physically very taxing, and it's a lot of stretching involved. I'm just going to ask before I answer that, Michael. Did you give Matt the questions ahead of time?
I know. Isn't it irritating? He's so polished.
He's so good. Yeah,
$100 well spent, Mike.
That is a guy who's known his. Well, there you go. That is a guy who's known his job for a long time, and he just rolled off. Because I got news for you. I do not sound that polished. It has actually been noted by a reviewer recently who said that they appreciated the fact that we sounded like normal people and not well polished. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Matt's ruining it because he's too good at this.
That's sort of a compliment. Yeah, I was the president of the Catholic Media Association, now Catholic Press Association, when I started. Kind of transitioned while I was president, but managed not to get impeached, which apparently it's not always easy to do these days. But anyway, so I made it through, and but it was easy to be a proponent and a cheerleader for Catholic media because of the love that I personally have for it and the experience that I had in doing it, and a lot of the things that we've been sharing already. The challenges, I think a lot of dioceses are asking themselves questions. The leaders of the diocese are asking themselves what they should do next, and it's easy to have a kind of a cookie cutter answer for that. And it's, like what we know in our church from subsidiarity, that you have to address each one individually in its unique circumstance. So, like what's right in Philadelphia may not be right in LA, may not be right in Portland, et cetera. But the idea of what we do as Catholic communicators, what we do in Catholic media, it's very clear in church teaching, like Inter Mirifica, and some of the things that Cardinal Foley wrote when he was with us, that Catholic media is not just like an appendix to what the church does. Like we are core. We are like a really essential part of how the church carries out her mission to save souls. And so that's very empowering, and to try to figure out ways and to be supportive of other local churches, different dioceses, et cetera, and how they're facing their struggles. I think it was a gift to have that role. I'm still on the board of directors, and that's what we're basically trying to do, is trying to help people and support people as they're facing a landscape, a profession that's constantly changing. When I started, Twitter didn't exist. So it's been a whirlwind. It continues to change. And I think that's the challenge for us, and the calling for us to continue to adapt, to be able to communicate and reach people A lot of times people that aren't usual Catholics, the benefit of, I think, the newsletter, but also the website focus is that sometimes we're reaching people that we don't reach with our diocesan publications. Those are usually folks that either they sign up or if you're at a diocese, fortunate enough to be at a diocese that has like a mandate for their subscription, which I was in Phoenix. I mean, we had a circulation of 130,000. It was amazing.
Wow.
But,
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, even I could sell ads in that thing. It was a huge circulation. But anyways, but those are all already folks that are coming to church. And I think the challenge with Catholic media, and I would say, I mean, I know you guys just recently covered the synod in a recent podcast as well. You guys are doing good things at the diocese, it sounds like. But like the challenge of the synod is also not to just hear from the same people. Right. So in Catholic media, I think our challenge is to reach the people that aren't coming to Mass yet. And that's something that we have to, that equation, I think, is one that's constantly changing.
So you have a lot of work to do, Jen. I'm just telling you that now. It's like just keep on that. Same thing for you, Pete. As my two colleagues that I see every day. I, on the other hand, have given up writing, so I don't need to worry about this.
I think first, all three of us, Mike, you'll take some photos, Pete will report, and I think I'll just supervise. We're going to the parade out where JD is because there's a lot of cheerleading, stretching, and parading going on out there. So and
it's great weather here in Mesa anyway, so not to brag, but haven't seen snow this year. So
all right, sold. We're there.
As we wrap up the podcast, we just have a few minutes left. We may lose Matt by the end of this. He's going to jump onto another call. So I want to say before he leaves, Matt, thank you very much for joining us. And this was been an absolute pleasure. And actually, I should apologize that you and I probably work about 10 miles from each other. And but there's a river in the way, and I haven't had you over before. So I apologize. But we were going to have to do this in person at some point, too.
Let's do that.
Yes.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks to everyone. Good to spend time with you.
Thanks, Matt.
You too, Matt. Thank you.
I was just thinking I should have worked on my Matt impression. So after he drops off the call, we could just do it seamlessly and nobody would notice,
I don't think anybody's that smooth, JD. I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure.
I am not. That's for sure. Yeah.
No, neither am I, Matt. Wow. I'm just great to meet you, Matt.
I was threatening to steal people from Philly. He didn't realize I was talking about him. So there you go. Jen, this is a very good idea, by the way, because we don't get to commiserate with our fellow journalists very often. And I refer to myself as a journalist in essentially name only because I'm the associate publisher of the paper. I realize what I am. I'm a terrible PR flack, but I do have responsibility of the paper. And as in that responsibility, I will tell people all the time, even though I've been a PR guy for almost 20 years now, yeah. I have an unfailing love of media, whether it be secular or Catholic. I think the work they do is incredibly important. I think, unfortunately, that media in general has been minimized over the last several years. Yeah. I think that there are bad examples of media out there, but I think they are the minority. I think newspaper writers and magazine writers, print media, still to this day is still the high watermark of journalists. Matter of fact, when someone comes to me and says, I want to go be a television journalist, I say, well, why don't you become a good journalist first and maybe they'll hire you. But go work for a newspaper or a magazine because you'll learn how to do actual journalism and not infotainment. I think it's a big deal. So to any of our listeners who have any interest in this or have ever wondered where they should be going, look at these, not necessarily fly-by-night online media outlets, but, publications that have been in existence for a long time that have a real track record of journalistic excellence and perhaps most importantly, or not perhaps, but definitely most importantly, ethics. Something that I know we're able to claim, and I know Catholic Philly is able to claim, and I certainly know that America has been able to proclaim over all these years. So go find good, usable resources, and don't worry about what they say. Just listen. I mean, don't worry about if they have an agenda or a bias necessarily, but read things from a variety of different outlooks, because yes, there is bias in media. That's why you need to go to multiple publications like I do, or just go to Twitter where everything's perfect.
Oh,
no, don't do that. Stay away.
Don't do that.
Although that is where I get most of my podcast information from. So anyway, JD, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate this. This has been an absolute pleasure. You are welcome back on the podcast anytime.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to be here with you.
And Pete, thank you very much for joining on and getting JD in line and always being here and doing great work.
Thank you, Mike. And Jen, always a pleasure. And I appreciated the Murderers Row reference with the 1927 Yankees. So I feel very Babe Ruthian right now. So thank you.
Well done. Well, thank you.
We hit it out of the park.
Another race. Perfect. And Jen, thank you very much for jumping on and helping us with this, and always being such a great managing editor who challenges me all the time and makes me lose my hair. But thank you very much. And to our listeners, we'll chat with you again next week. See you, everybody.